So, we are here. It's the finale of Rebels Reviewed, maybe, episodes that we're doing, but it's the finale of the series, and I will say there are going to be some spoilers for the Ahsoka trailer that's recently come out, so just be aware of that, because it's inevitably, towards the end, likely going to link in with a few things, but we are going to try to do a specific episode about almost an episode 5 of Rebels Reviewed, how it's going to connect into that. But before we go into anywhere near the end and what's beyond Rebels, we have to talk about what happened in Season 4, the Mammoth finale, and in my opinion some of the best Star Wars that is out there. And with me as always we've got Math. How are you doing, good sir?
Right, threw me off. You came to me first. I thought you were going to do Dave.
I normally do Dave first. I realised that as I said it.
I muted and thought, that's fine. I've got a moment. Yeah, I'm doing fine. It's been a bit of a trek, but I mean, if you're listening to this, you really should have watched all this anyway. But if you haven't, go and watch Rebels. Listen to Mike. He preaches the truth. It is absolutely fantastic.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you feel that way. And we're going to delve a bit more into that. But first, Dave, it's been the end of your second rewatch. So it's how has it been? How's the journey? How was Series 4 in general for you? And how you doing?
I'm very good. And it's great to be back talking to you two about Rebels again. So going through the second time made me appreciate series. They say season in the US, so I'll keep it consistent with the US. So season 4, I'd forgotten just how much of a jump up in quality there was. And also, at the end of the last episode, you were asking me about what I felt about Sabine, and I thought, that's a bizarre question. I don't know. It's a bit let down, I guess. But watching this made me remember, oh, that's why, because I felt like I knew Sabine more, but up until this season, we hadn't really explored her character at all. And I know when, you got Bo-Katan and stuff in The Mandalorian, I remember thinking, where's Sabine? When's she coming up? So, and actually I will just say, Math, you lucky bastard. You lucky bastard. Because honestly, you could not, for Ahsoka, have timed this any better at all. And I'd forgotten even that much, but I'm watching it through, and I'd already seen the Ahsoka trailer, so I could see all the bloody nods and everything. Again, we're going to try not to speak about that. But basically, that should be Rebels Season 5 by the looks of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I think the overriding sense was, shit, this is so much better. I love seasons 1 to 3, but this is different level. Every single episode, it knocks it out of the park, and it just gets better and better. And I'm scrolling down the episodes because I'm thinking, well, there are certain highlights where you remember. But honestly, that doesn't diminish all the episodes. I think they were all great. So yeah, definitely. It's hard to suggest for anyone to even just drop in. If you were trying to give someone a teaser, and try and get them hooked on Rebels, I don't think you could start at 4. But it's definitely, it's right up there, isn't it? With Andor and, all the best Star Wars content for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to Megan about this, and I said some people on these Facebook events, and maybe some of the listeners, understandably, are going, okay, what essential episodes do I have to watch for Clone Wars and Rebels? And everyone's just going, all of them. It's basically, I would probably argue with Clone Wars not as much, because it's very arc-related. But with Rebels, it's although you don't have to see the Ahsoka-centric episodes, all of her plot lines in Rebels are so intertwined with that of Ezra's and the whole ensemble of Rebels, either directly or indirectly. So it's one of those. It's just Rebels Series 5. Never thought I'd see the day. It's just, there's so many things I want to see, and Ahsoka is going to be its own thing. But a lot of people, if they're going to be watching it, are going to be missing out on some stuff. And a lot of people are just going to be watching YouTube videos or maybe listening to us talk and trying to get the snippets, the shortcuts of what you can learn about Ahsoka before delving into the show. And I also warn people that I sound a bit gravelly, and if you're watching the video, look a bit gravelly as well, because I was at 2 weddings this weekend for both of them, and they were a bit far away, so I'm absolutely shattered. So if people see me yawning at any point as well, I want to put that out there, that I'm not bored of either of my amazing Star Wars friends. But Math, you have now finished Rebels. which I have deemed as one of the best pieces of Star Wars content out there. I think the Series 2 finale, as itself, is one of the best things out there, and there's 1 or 2 episodes in that that's quite cool. Series 3 is some amazing parts, the Maul and Kenobi stuff, and a few other highlights. But this series, as Dave amazingly said, almost every episode you could isolate and it could be an amazing topic of discussion. You've got the Mandalorian start of it, the premiere, you've got Bo-Katan, you've got the Rogue One connections with Saw Gerrera again, you've got part of the Rebel Alliance forming, you've got the stuff with Kanan, you've got all this stuff with Ahsoka and Thrawn, and even Palpatine shows up and Wedge. You've got so many threads, so many episodes focusing on so many different things, and there's connections to legends and new stuff in the canon. So how has the ride been for you, Math, from the start of Rebels where, when you're watching early Rebels, you kind of think, yeah, this is a bit better than I thought it was. This is a bit better than, a certain animation I expected, all the way to the final bit of Rebels. How has your journey been?
It's amusing because you mentioned the animation. I think the first few episodes are like, right, yeah, it's an animation. I started it with my son, but obviously it's a little bit too grown up for him. I think I forgot about the animation, to be fair. I was just watching another TV program. The first season is good, but it kind of meanders through. And I think once you get into season 2 and onwards, that's where you see that growth with, the main character, Ezra. You see the growth of him and the people around him. And then you feel that you're going on the journey with him. You feel that you can kind of see him go. It's kind of seeing that bit of Luke that we didn't see kind of before. Obviously, Obi-Wan turns up, but it's that there were a big chunk missing from Luke. I feel that Rebels kind of does episodes 3, 4, 5, kind of.
G4, 5, 6.
Well, yeah, 4, 5, 6.
The original trilogy.
Yeah. I feel it kind of does that, and it brings it back a bit for the kids. But I really enjoy it. 'Cause I also feel there's a lot of darkness in there, and it does kind of, considering it's in the UK anyway, it's rated as 6+. They do kind of ride that quite, with some of the things that's mentioned, some of the things that happens in there, they do ride that quite. It could even be a 12A, to be fair, at times.
Mm-hmm.
We have genocide and things like that. But I'm kind of glad that my youngest didn't watch it with me, because he'd have been, what's that, Daddy? It's like, yes. I'll tell you later. But it's, again, if you listen to this, I'm sure you've watched it, but go and watch it. It's some of the best Star Wars out there. There are 1 or 2 episodes that are a bit hit and miss, but all in all, the actual entire story, there's a certain thing I do really want to talk about for this season, and that, but I want to try and hold off and that, because I thought there was a big gut punch with season 3 with Maul, and I was like, and then what happens in this one? I kind of. If people have watched Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding, I remember watching that with my wife, and then the screens face back, and we both just sat there for a while. Well, I kind of felt that I did this with one of these episodes of I knew it was coming. You could tell, you could feel with the build-up, but it was like, oh, why?
Yeah, well, I was going to start with the Mandalorian premiere, but we can jump around. We're at the end. We can do whatever we want, is the message of the show. So I'll sideline the Mandalorian-centric stuff at the moment, because even though it is the premiere, I wrote quite a few notes about it, because I remember there being quite a bit, and that's it. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll put that to one side. But you're speaking about the biggest spoiler of the season, and for me, one of the most painful parts of all of Star Wars, the fate of among my top 3 all-time favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and that is Kanan Jarrus. And his character arc in the whole show is almost as powerful as Ezra's. He has such a turn from, first he's just kind of going along for the, not quite going along for the ride, but he's connected to Hera, and he's got there's a family dynamic there, but he's kind of, they're the scrappy gang, they're kind of fighting the Empire on their own terms, they're kind of living outlaws in a way, and he's got this Jedi past he's not coming to terms with. And then he meets Ezra, he has to come to terms with his Jedi sort of past and become a master, and every season he becomes stronger and different. And you see the change in Ezra, but the change in Kanan. In Series 4, when you see him get out his lightsaber, and it doesn't happen as much as in other series, but when he does, he is just unbelievable. He's jumping off people, he's deflecting all kinds of crazy things, and when he finally is at peace with his blindness and the gifts that have been given to him, and then he has that moment about a third through this. And one of the reasons of the rewatch, so I'm very excited to hear what Dave thinks, is with this rewatch, you see with Kanan, he knows what's happening so long before. And there's a link as well with Hera, and it's revealed at the end Hera's pregnant and has a kid and things, and we'll talk about that. But when he first dies, she says she didn't get to tell him something. And you as an audience member think, that you didn't love him, or, a certain thing like that. And then you find out right at the end that I only just caught that it's obviously the kid. So Kanan Jarrus, my favorite Jedi, saves them, and he changes a lot. So Dave, what did you think of Kanan from the start all the way up to his demise, especially as it's the second time? How was that experience for you?
Again, I feel like it hit harder the second time, but also it was telegraphed, or maybe I was just noticing it. It was telegraphed so much. I mean, he might as well have wrapped up his affairs and wrote his will and everything. It was just because I knew it was coming. I was like, oh yeah, there's like I should have been able to spot this. And the thing is, if we liken it to the first sacrifice of a Jedi we saw was Obi-Wan in New Hope all those years ago. And we only met him like 20 minutes before or something. I don't actually know what it was, but, we didn't know him that well. So for him to make that sacrifice, it didn't really, you didn't really buy into the character until you'd watched the film 10 times, and then you love the character, but you already knew he was going to die. Whereas here, I think Kanan is such a three-dimensional character. He's not a monk who's, he does everything perfectly. He wrestles with not wanting to be not just a Jedi, but a mentor to Ezra. And, you can see his journey, and it's not linear. It's very, very up and down and everything. And, you get the impression he knows what's coming, not just in terms of his battle moves and everything, but he sort of knows his demise is coming as well. You sort of get this sense from this season he is stronger with the Force, and maybe that comes from just being much more at peace with himself. But, it really stung. I mean, I don't mind saying I shed a tear, when he makes that final move, and it is so well done. I mean, the build up to it, those moments, the cinematography, the work on it, the shot with him and Hera, I thought it was so well done. And I was like, Christ, is this only episode 10? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've got the emotional strength to make the rest of the season now. So. Yeah, unbelievable. Like I say, I can't think in live action. I'm sure there have been other emotionally charged things like that, but I can't actually think of an equivalent.
Han Solo in Force Awakens, I think, is probably the closest. I would say, although we saw that coming, I think they're very different characters, but that is probably in the whole series of Star Wars that's the main one that really, even though I can see it coming, it doesn't hurt. But I still get a more emotional reaction from Kanan because just more hours, more time seeing him as well.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it hit harder. Maybe because I don't know. Maybe because the Solo one, he was surprised by it, so it was a proper murder. Whereas this was a sacrifice. He was sacrificing himself to make sure he pushed everyone else away. So. Yeah, but yeah, probably up there. But yeah, unbelievable episode.
And I will say, before I come to Math, my favourite moment is when he's holding it back and he looks straight at Hera, and then his blindness goes away for a moment and he has vision again.
Oh my god!
When he sees Hera and it's his last time seeing her, and that's when it's really showing you he knows what's happening the whole time. One or two episodes ago, he communes with the Loth Wolves, and then he's charging towards Lothal, and then they stop him on a speeder bike, and then he immediately goes, I understand. Tell me what I need to do. And from that point, he already knew there was a sense of something coming. But at that point, that's when it kind of was confirmed. I think it was an episode or two before. So, Math, you did predict this in the previous episode. You thought it was kind of coming. So how did it hit you? Did you see it coming in that episode? Like, how did it feel for you going through it the first time?
Yes. That episode, you could kind of see the build up, the bit when he shaves his beard, cuts his hair. He felt he was going to. The way it came across, it felt like he was going on a mission, and he knew this was going to be it. He knew there was a chance that he may not come back. There was so much at stake, and it was one of those things. As it started, I'm thinking, right, something's going to happen here. You could just tell, and it got to kind of near the point at the end where, obviously, when they go into the big bomb, it's like, come on, guys, you don't go there. But it comes to a point when he's holding it back, and you're thinking, well, you never know. Maybe he could jump onto the ship. Maybe he could do something about it. And it's like you say, that point when he has clear vision, and you're just saying, right, this is our point where we're going to say goodbye to him. We're going to, and I think because, although I haven't binge watched it as much, I've watched in this, in the last, few months, I felt like I've grown with him, and it's a big chunk, it's a big miss, of the fact that we've lost him. Now, I know when I messaged you and said, I've just watched this, it's like, you did mention his voice is in, is it the last Star Wars film that was on?
Yeah, Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker. There is there's a line from him there when they're all talking to her. Without doing spoilers too much, I really do hope we do get to see him in some form in Ahsoka.
We know he's gone. But yeah, Ahsoka, there's no confirmation, no rumors, no mention of it. But I said to Megan, my dream, and we'll delve more into it when we have the bonus episode, but my number one want, like I'm fairly certain they're going to have Hayden Christensen come into it, which I'm going to love. He's in the Kenobi show. I suspect he's going to pop up in a lot more places, which I'm so excited for if we get an Ahsoka, Hayden Christensen interaction. But anyway, I feel if they did a live action Kanan Force Ghost, I'd lose my mind. I wouldn't know what to do. He's probably going to be my next tattoo, actually, Kanan, on my Star Wars sleeve, because he's just a character that really speaks to me. But I also want to ask you, Math, with Kanan and more into like your feelings of him, and also the Doom Wolf as well. How do you like Kanan's kind of transition into the Force in a less, in a way we've not seen before, less conventional?
I mean, that bit when they kept coming up, they kept saying Doom to him all the time. And it's like, obviously, it wasn't until I think the next episode they explained that was his name.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I might be reading this completely wrong. So, you're going to probably turn around and say, no, you're an idiot. But it felt like the big white wolf was a version of Kanan, to be fair.
Yeah.
Now, whether that is the case or but it just felt like that point when they stopped him and he spoke this, I understand it. It felt like a future version of him had come and said, look, this is what you're going to have to do. And with Star Wars, the way that they kind of do it is when the Jedi's pass away, they go back into the Force. And it was like he accepted that. It was the point when, like, I know what I have to do now. And this is the way we win the war. This is the way we're going to have to, the path that I've been chosen to do. And that now, again, throughout the show, it's never confirmed that these wolves are, that it is Kanan, but that's what I took from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Unless there's a comic out there.
There's very little. There is a Kanan comic, but it's a prequel. But Dave, what do you think of the Loth Wolves and that sort of the Kanan and Dune? What do you kind of think of that stuff?
I know you love some of the stuff with the Force, like that gets a bit out there, but I'm not sure I love it. I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm happiest when the Force is almost subjective. So okay, if Vader's using the Force to pull a bloody spaceship down or something like in Kenobi, then okay, maybe that breaks my theory. But if you think about those first couple of movies in particular, it was almost like mind over matter. It was almost like, well, is it a thing, or did you just believe it so much? Skywalker takes this 1 in a million shot and he nails it. But was that the Force, or was he just sort of spurred on to do that? And he can hear his 5-minute master's voice saying, trust the Force. Maybe that's just in his head. Maybe that's just a recollection. So I like it to be a little bit closer to reality.
More subtle.
And more subtle and grounded, for these space wizards and aliens, and but I guess more sci-fi and less kind of mystical and magical. I guess I like things. If I'm watching sci-fi, I like to know it's sci-fi. If I'm watching fantasy adventure with wizards and warlocks and everything, I can calibrate my brain to that. But some of the stuff in the animated shows like Rebels and Clone Wars as well, where it gets into the Force and these different entities and whatever, which I know you want to talk about, but it loses me a little bit, if I'm honest. It's just not for me, that one. And when you got this massive fuck off wolf, it's like I'd prefer it to be more subtle. Like you say, that's the right word.
It is interesting. I mean, I love all the weirdness and strangeness of the Force, as you rightly put. And this Rebels does have quite a bit of it. Clone Wars it doesn't have a lot of it, but there's 2 or 3 arcs that it goes full hog with it, and there's some of the episodes where there's some of the most divisive among fans. Very few fans say they're bad episodes, but there's like half the fans go, love them, some of the best in Star Wars, and the other half the fans go, they're good, but I didn't like it. And it's one of those rare times in Star Wars where people don't generally argue that much about these certain Clone Wars episodes, because like that element of the Force is so fine. But I think that with the wolves, I kind of link it with the Purrgil, and I kind of like the idea that hyperspace isn't something that sentient humans or humanoids created, and that it's something that was already kind of in existence, and all they've done with their ships is kind of almost tune them in to being able to do that, which obviously links in with the Purrgil. But yeah, so the Force stuff I absolutely love, and I think that brings us into The World Between Worlds, which is a very odd episode, very unique, and it's one of the most talked about Star Wars episodes in a lot of the Star Wars fandom. Whenever anything is mentioned about the Force, every live action series, without fail, someone will say, I'll bet The World Between Worlds will be in this. When Kenobi came out, with The Mandalorian, with Ahsoka now, it's one of those things that a lot of people are always talking about, and a lot of other people are like, we don't want it again. We just want it to be that one-off thing and not come back. And a lot of other people are going, I want it in everything. Dave, what did you think, speaking of the Force, and you aren't as interested by the weirdness, what about this time travel, portal-y stuff, and how Ahsoka is saved? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I like the callback, I think, initially. But yeah, I stand by what I was saying. I just, it's not for me. It seems a bit Harry Potter to me. It seems like it's mixing the genres, and I almost think so. If you watch Event Horizon, right, and they make a nice kind of visual with the paper, yeah. So you get your paper, and then you fold space and time. So that is a thing. So gravity, a massive gravitational force, can distort space and time. And so if I can wrap my head around it as physics, then I can go with it with sci-fi. Whereas when you step into this world, it's all symmetrical. It's all Like I don't know if geometry is a profession, but let's say an architect, has drawn it out. It looks like Leonardo da Vinci has drawn it out or something, and it's the precision of it. But there's something that jars with me for this thing that you would think is just like if you had this weirdness with, like, say, black holes or something like that, it will be slightly chaotic. And so the symmetry, just that my brain won't accept it, to be honest. But I did like the fact that it called back right to the end of season 2, because we didn't see what happened to Ahsoka, and then she just turns up. So to have it call back to that moment, I thought was great.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Mav? What do you think about the world between worlds and the mysticism of the Force and Ahsoka coming back? A lot to throw at you.
I'm going to mention one name to you, Bobby, and that I did look out for the little green bird.
Yep.
And that, does that always turn up when it's Ahsoka?
Yeah, Morai. Yeah, so it gets explained in the Clone Wars. He's Morai the Convor. A Convor is a type of owl. It's also known as a Trandoshan bird. And the Morai, the Convor species is shown elsewhere in Star Wars. It's in live action in certain places. But yeah, that specific Convor is a mystical one called Morai that connects with a being called the Sister, which you saw on the mural before the World Between Worlds. But I'll delve into that a little bit. I won't spoil because it's connected heavily with the Clone Wars or something. I won't spoil that. But yeah, sorry. You spoke up Morai. Do they always pop up? Yeah, in the Mandalorian episode where Ahsoka is, right at the start, Morai is actually in a tree and flies down. And you get it a bit, you see him a little bit in Clone Wars at a certain point. But sorry, please continue.
Yeah. So I kind of, I mean, in when we see Ahsoka in Mandalorian, it was something I didn't notice until you mentioned. I went back and then looked, but this is kind of, she talks to him and that. So that World Between Worlds, it feels a little bit Doctor Strange, kind of or even Spider-Man. I was still trying to get my head around it. I was trying to understand what they was going to use it for. And in a way, it shows that the Emperor's trying to get that so that he can then control everything. I felt that this is the only, if people talk about this highly, I'm going to probably, upset some people. But I feel they kind of set it up and never did anything with it.
Right.
And that.
You don't think saving Ahsoka is very much?
Well, yeah.
Just put your leg. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But you see that's now pulled her out of time and placed her into this. So now, and I think, is there a bit in Clone Wars where Vader goes back to try and find Ahsoka, or is that something else? Or maybe it's a comic.
I will not say anything. I know what you're thinking of, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. What I will say is Clone Wars is every part you see in Clone Wars is all before anything Rebels. Or the entirety, flashbacks and all kinds of other stuff, time jumps, it's all contained before Rebels. That's all I'll say about that.
Right, because I felt it must have been a comic that I've seen there where I see Vader goes back to a temple to go find Ahsoka and he only finds a lightsaber and then comes away. So maybe that's because Ezra's pulled her out and now placed her in a different point in time. Which, I mean, yes, that is a big point. That saved her life. But then they don't seem to do anything. It comes up again later when the Emperor tries to trick Ezra into opening the door with his family. And he's like, no, not going to do this. It's not real. I accept what's happened. This has made me who I am. But again, I felt should they have done something more with it? Should it have been a bit more of a, like a Spider-Man's multiverse, or Spider-Verse even, or like the Doctor Strange? Again, with Doctor Strange, they kind of have the multiverse of madness. There's not much of it there, to be honest.
There's like 7 multiverses.
Yeah, it felt like it was a missed opportunity that they could have probably done more with it. And maybe they had plans to do more. and then it's just never happened. I don't know. I mean, the episode's good because then you have this bit when Ezra and Ahsoka. Ahsoka realizes Ezra's a lot older. He's matured so much from, when
it's been about 2-ish years or so, thereabouts. And he was like, he's like a teenager, so I think he was like 16, 17 when she last saw him, and now he's like 19-ish. So that can be quite a big jump for people.
Could have gone into a whole Attack of the Clones thing, couldn't it? So I'm glad it didn't.
But it just, I like the episode. It gives some options now to do something different. Maybe that might come into play in Ahsoka. Which, if fans are calling for this is the perfect place to do it, because Ahsoka's been there. Now, whether she can travel back and forth, whether she needs Ezra to do that. Again, you did say that when season 4 finishes, all questions will be answered.
I did lie a little bit.
Yes, you did. Because
did you say that? That was naughty, that
was. I said it more than once.
Because I'm thinking, it does answer a lot of questions.
It asked most of the answers, most of what you were asking specifically. Yeah. It did, but I didn't want to be like, there's questions that you won't know the answer to, because then you'd start really prying, and I'm like, no, don't look too hard at certain bits.
but yeah, it was nice that we now know that we have Ahsoka, because there was that thing where, they left the temple and we don't know what's happened to her. She was facing Vader, so it didn't look very good for her. But yeah, it will be. I do against, I know you want to save it for the Ahsoka episode. So
we said we'd dip into it. It's okay. We'll dip into it a little bit. It's not a problem.
I do feel it's something that it feels like the Ahsoka series, to me, from what I've seen of the trailer, and then obviously this is great now because we're on the same platform of knowing what we know to a certain degree. No more of this. I know season 4. I know season 5.
You don't know the 7 series of Clone Wars yet. The whole series of Tales of the Jedi. So you are.
Don't make it a competition, Math. We won't win.
The Ahsoka novel. You're getting there. You're certainly getting there, Math. I appreciate how much you've done, but once you've watched all of Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi, then you'll be up to Dave.
Yeah. At least I knew something that you didn't last time. So
you did. You completely floored me with that. I hold my hands up high. You remember the Geonosian Queen with Darth Vader, but now you brought it up. It's ingrained, and I'll never forget it ever. So,
Mike doesn't remember. He was once bested, and never again.
Never. But I will say with The World Between Worlds, I love the episode. I love time travel-y stuff. One of my favorite films is a film not a lot of people like that much, which is The Butterfly Effect. I adore it. I really like going back in time and all that kind of tomfoolery, but I don't want it in my Star Wars. In Avengers, I was okay with it being an Endgame because it felt like it was trying to be a one-off kind of thing. Whether or not it is very unlikely. But I don't mind it if in a big fantasy or sci-fi or whatever franchise, if in Star Trek they found a planet and it goes weird. Interstellar doesn't quite have time travel, but it's like time manipulation-y stuff. I don't mind that being used if it seems like this is almost impossible. This only ever happens once in a million years or something, or this crazy thing that happened. I don't mind it as a one-off, as a almost Deus Ex Machina, but I don't want Ahsoka, the series, to go into it. I don't want anyone. I'd be happy if no one ever went to the World Between Worlds again, apart from maybe if we got a movie thousands of years before the Skywalker saga and someone else somehow stumbled into it and they tried to save someone and they became like a dark side follower because of it and they used it for the wrong reason. I would quite enjoy that element. They go back. I think this might be a spoiler, but I've not seen the film. It might be a spoiler for Flash. I know in the comics there's quite a bit of stuff where if you go back in time and I know that in some of the DC comics where, you go back in time, save Bruce's parents and the mum becomes the Joker and all. There's all kinds of time manipulation stuff where things go bad. And I would quite enjoy seeing something like that completely far removed. But again, as a one-off, maybe. I think Visions would maybe be a cool place for that. But even though I love the episode, I don't want time travel in Star Wars. I don't. Time travel is a cheat. And although in films and like the MCU and comics, no one ever dies. In Star Wars, people do actually die. But half the time they come back. If they're a villain, they might come back. If they're a good person, they won't. You know, Qui-Gon gets a little jab and he dies, and Maul gets cut in half and comes back. So it's if you're good.
Apart from that,
and the Emperor coming back, and this, and so
it's interesting actually. When you said about jumping back to Kanan, with Kanan's death, I was thinking about this one. When we lose Vader, when he turns on the Emperor to save Luke, and that, I don't feel that kind of had the same feeling as what I did losing Kanan. I feel that although he's a bad guy and he then turns good, I think the Kanan one hits a lot harder because throughout we've seen the build up and we've seen the kind of we've gone along with him. But yeah, I just feel that sometimes I feel that hit harder because we do feel that love and that growth with him. Whereas, when Vader does switch over, he's just been a villain who also goes, do you know what? Got a bit of a conscience here.
It's hard to feel that much sympathy for a space Nazi. I mean, he sort of did his thing, but it wasn't really redemption, was it?
Well, I don't know. He saved his son, so we can forgive the mass amount of people that he's killed.
Mass genocide of all these different worlds
and the Jedi as well.
Slaughtering the younglings might, have a thing to say about it.
It's definitely the Kanan death. It's the pinnacle for me of Star Wars emotional beats. I think the Twilight of the Apprentice, when you get Ahsoka and Vader, and when you watch all the Clone Wars and you go back to that episode, because you will, because like I think Dave might have done, but I definitely have just gone back and just watched Twilight of the Apprentice, the 2-parter, even just the second part again, or the Vader Ahsoka confrontation. You can watch it on YouTube. Like once you've seen Clone Wars and the emotional weight you feel to that, even before that, when I first watched it, I was like, you can feel there's so much there. And so, with Ahsoka, we'll slightly move on from that because there's quite a lot of other stuff to get into. So when we loop all the way back, because we're going to get carried away some... Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Can I just say, before we move off this episode...
We'll go to Mando. So after this, you can go straight onto the Mandalorian.
Yeah, so I just thought the Emperor Palpatine... I thought Ian McDiarmid coming back was brilliant. And, the performance that he gives as Emperor Palpatine, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? Am I losing it on where this is in the timeline? I'm like, he's already the Emperor. That was like the whole formation of the Empire. And, this is pre-Rebels. And he's being this, old, sweet old granddad sort of thing. And then he turns into the Emperor. And it's a masterful voice performance. And I just thought, again, that was my favorite bit of this episode. I'm with you. I think time travel can be a bit of a cheat. So stuff like Back to the Future, you've got to make this small story and you put the characters and it's ultimately quite a small story, isn't it? The fact that you got time travel there. When you let the genie out of the bottle in the Star Wars universe or the MCU to a degree, could argue, MCU hasn't been the same since Endgame. You kind of leave the door open then. It's like, we'll just time travel it. It's just, I feel like it didn't need to be there. Again, I think you could sort of have things where, again, time's distorted maybe, but not this very clean, I'll just go back to the past and sort this thing out. So,
No, I agree completely. Well, Math, I'll ask you, and then we'll talk about the premiere. Just Palpatine and himself. How do you feel about him coming back? And obviously, Ian McDiarmid's voice work amazing, but obviously, he came back in the World Between Worlds, and then in our finale as well, when he came to, as Dave was saying, and he came in the hologram of almost Senator Palpatine, and even Megan said she was watching it. She was like, "This did." I'm right in the timeline. This is confusing me a bit. This is happening at the same time as everything else. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, we've seen this before, so it's an illusion she's doing. And then when it happened, she was like, yeah, I remember now. So it's that thing. Did you feel that, Math? How did you feel about Palps coming up?
I love that bit where you see this. You see Palpatine, but then you see that kind of flickering between him and the Emperor. It was good to see this because then you realise that he's been a bastard all this time. we see it in other shows as well, but obviously this is all before we got Andor. But you realise that he's been working behind the scenes for so long. And it was good to realise the fact that, he's been a bastard pretty much from, day dot. And the good thing about him, he's one of these which he's so good at manipulating people to give them what they want. You see it with Anakin and that when he manipulates Anakin and tells him lies to get him to do what he wants him to do and turns him into Vader. Although we only see him for, what is it, 2 episodes we have him in?
Yeah, one of them is just the World Between Worlds. He's in it for seconds, really, like 2 conversations.
The other thing I didn't like that is he seemed to be able to reach through, but not come through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I felt as well, he was using fire to kind of attack them. I think the mistake there should have been lightning.
It was Sith magic, and it relates to the Clone Wars. Yay! Buzzword! Only is a couple episodes where the Force, in the eyes of dark side magic, gets explored a little bit, and it shows that Sidious dabbles in it a little bit. But that's quite a deep cut, to be fair.
Because I just felt that it should have been lightning coming at them, but fair enough. Obviously, it makes sense.
I agree with you. Thematically, it would have been cooler, but I think the only thing I can think of is maybe the lightning. If it is weird, though. I was thinking, well, the lightning would be able to grab Ezra in the leg, but then I'm thinking, but then fire can't. That weird tentacle thing that came out and grabbed at Ezra's leg. So I agree with you. I think it would have worked. I don't know why they chose fire specifically. I guess it was just trying to be a bit different from lightning, kind of maybe showing he's doing mysticism stuff.
So
I know.
I mean, it's like with lightning, they could have had it like a lightning whip to grab his leg to kind of pull him back in.
Yeah.
Whereas it just, again, maybe again, I've upset Star Wars fans that if people really, really want this, maybe seeing it in live action, maybe it might change them. But I felt that it, apart from bringing Ahsoka back, because the thing is, he's pulled Ahsoka out of there, and now he's placed her 3 years further into the future. So that kind of screws everything up. But Ahsoka wasn't definitely going to die there. Yes, she was facing up against Vader, but that, we wouldn't have known what would have happened, really. He's just pulled her out of time and punching somewhere else, and then they just come and find me that way.
I think it was trying to indicate she would have died at that point. I think that was what was trying to be indicated, and with some stuff I think shown in the Clone Wars, there's some mysticism around Ahsoka, and that's why Morai follows her around and who Morai actually is. And so I think it's kind of that, almost the MacGuffin, that Ahsoka is this kind of, has a path, that there's all these kind of, anyone trying to kill Ahsoka's like, what, all these things that keep coming out are stopping me doing it. There's these bullshit reasons. But I see what you're saying, and it is, with the World Between Worlds, on this is now my 3rd rewatch of it, I did realise that Ezra does have that thought of like, we can save everyone, we can save Kanan. And then it hurt again watching Kanan die from a slightly different angle. And I was like, I only watched this the other day. I don't need to go through it again. But that moment, I think, is him kind of really learning to let go. And once he does that, that leads on to him in the into the finale, where he has that Kanan kind of feel it to him, especially in the last episode, which obviously on Disney Plus is like an extra long 45-minute thing. And around that time, he's got these plans going on. He tells that character, Martin, I think his name is, about the secret plan, and the Purge will come out. And he's got that thing where he tells people, I've had a vision, I know what's going to happen. And that's very much like Kanan. And I think that as a story device, the World Between Worlds was kind of trying to, the saving Ahsoka thing's cool, but it's almost like we can't figure out how to save Ahsoka in that situation and why she wasn't present. So let's do a time pull out thing. But I think with Ezra, it was kind of showing Palpatine wanting to use it for evil, and then it was showing that Ezra could have kind of done it for his selfish gains, even though it wouldn't have probably worked out that way, and he chose not to. And I think that's kind of his growth, where him letting go, and he's always had an issue with being able to just be one with the Force, and that's a lesson that Kanan's taught him over and over again.
I think it's that thing with him where he's realised that there is a balance, and if he takes it away, that balance is going to be off. It's that bit where he's matured, and it's. I think does Ahsoka said to him, "You could save him, but should you save him?" I think
she says basically, if you save him, then your friends will die. So, and you're not meant to. You're not here to do that. It was kind of like, look, more I got you to bring me back. That's what you're here to do. Let's go. Kind of thing.
Yeah, because that is a thing of, he may have pulled Kanan out, but then he would have died. Hera would have, everyone else could have died at that point. So then it messes the timeline up. So that's the point when he realizes you can't play around with this sort of thing. You've just got to let things go. Fair enough. All right, I've just pulled, Ahsoka out. Oopsie daisy.
It is a bit of a contradiction. But I want to ask you.
You can save me, but not everyone else.
Yeah. Dave, what did you think about Ezra and him in the finale with the Purgil and his plan and that stuff? Like, how have you found Ezra as a character throughout the series?
So it's been interesting, hasn't it? Because he kind of dabbled with the dark side. I mean, other people know it as being a teenager. He was definitely veering that way and walking the path of Anakin, really. And then in season 4, there was no real sort of mention of that. He just learned his lessons, and that was it. He was on the path to the righteous, and I almost feel like it, not in a bad way, but it diminishes Luke Skywalker's character. Because if you think what Luke did, it's not the same. I think what Ezra has done, in the short time that he's been a Padawan, or kind of a Padawan, he's done better. And he, whereas Luke kind of made the easy choices, and he'd always make the selfish reasons. He didn't complete his training with Yoda because he had half a vision and then went off on this half-arsed run and then got his arm chopped off. And, just he's a bit shit, really, isn't he?
Megan doesn't like Luke. She calls him whiny. He just
ends up falling forward. He is whiny. Even his mates called him Wormy. So I still wonder why they were his friends. But obviously, I love Luke Skywalker, but I do think Ezra is kind of a cat's attacking my foot.
It's like, don't you dare talk about Luke about that way.
The Luke Skywalker fan club. So Ezra just does seem like that upgrade, and again, it's like Luke's standing on the shoulders of giants. Without Ezra making that sacrifice, Luke isn't there to make that shot. All these things, they're sort of connected on the screen, but they're connected in my head canon as well, So I absolutely love Ezra. And again, fuck it, I'm going to spoil it if you've not watched the trailer for Ahsoka. When he turns up in the trailer, it blew my fucking mind. I was like, fucking at last. Because honestly, and I was like, fucking Math has just watched this and he's walking straight into Ahsoka, you bastard. Because when I watched it, I was like, shit.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
The thing is, if you want to do an Ahsoka thing, I don't know. But I think that trailer, that hologram we see of Ezra, I think is from this. From end of season.
Well, there's a few, isn't there? So there's the kind of wall mural thing and everything.
Yeah.
There are shot for shot things pulled out of the animated show.
The speech that Chopper plays for them all at the end, where he says, "All right, Sabine, you go do what what I want you to do." I think what's in live action is that hologram. I don't.
Yeah. 100%.
Now, the thing is, on IMDb, they do a great thing of they only show, all the actors. I mean, one episode because we've seen them in the trailer. That's it. Except for Ahsoka, she's obviously in all age. Now, is this just going to be a kind of a tie-in to kind of then send Ahsoka? I think her and Sabine are going to do certain things together, but I'm not sure if we're going to get Ezra, because if they go rescue Ezra and bring him back, that causes a problem to Star Wars, because when we grew up with Luke, there was only him as a Jedi. Where all
But
the
this
rest
is
of the
all
Jedi-
post this is all after the original trilogy, isn't it? So they wrap it up quite quickly in the last episode, where they basically say, "Oh, the war's over now," and
Right.
so this is after that original trilogy.
I must have missed that bit then.
It's around the time of the Mandalorian, the Ahsoka series, but the end of as Dave said, the end of Star Wars Rebels series 4, episode 15, right at that end bit where Sabine's got her haircut and Ahsoka's there. That's meant to be after the Battle of Endor. That's after Return of the Jedi. We don't know how long after. That's the thing. And a theory of the Ahsoka show is it's going to start before the end of Rebels. And then maybe the 2-episode finale, this is the 2-episode premiere, this is my sort of thoughts, is going to be an episode ahead of just her being badass and doing stuff. And then episode 2 might be a flashback of showing where Ahsoka was, how she connected with Sabine, that mural that I saw at Star Wars Celebration, the live action mural you see, saw at Star Wars Celebration. It's so cool. But yeah, it's one of those with the Ahsoka show is it's a jump ahead by quite a lot. We don't know the exact timeline, but it seems to be approximately 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So, and I think you're right with the Ezra. I don't think we're going to see Ezra till right near the end, because the question that we've had for many, many years, and you haven't, Math, you've had it for many weeks, is what happened to Ezra and Thrawn? No idea. Like that, we still don't know. There's no explanation as of yet. And the thing is, when they find Thrawn, they're going to find Ezra. And there's a few rumors buzzing around, including myself. It's like, is Ezra going to be good? Is it going to be a bit of a turn? But Ezra as himself as a character, did you say everything you wanted to say about him, Dave, before I move on to Math? Because we got sidetracked.
Yeah, just, I mean, I would be gutted if he turned. I can't see it.
I don't think
I just
he will,
think it,
but...
No, I mean, I'm not saying never, but let's say it's roughly the same odds I'll give you as having Darth Binkus. So I am... Yeah, disappointed we see Thrawn in the trailer. I know, trying not to speak about the trailer, but no, I just think, again, he feels to me like Luke's spiritual big brother or something like that. You know, he's kind of gone through a similar journey and, made that incredibly mature sacrifice right at the end of the episode there. I mean, he could have fucking told people about his plan, to be fair, so he's not perfect. But, then they wouldn't have had the surprise. But no, I think Ezra's brilliant. And again, it took me watching season 4 to remind me just how much I love the character. Because 1 to 3, he's kind of... Season 1, he's like Star Wars Aladdin, basically. Yeah. Season 3, he's like a little teenage shit, and dabbling with the dark side of the Force. And so, he's kind of there, but he's just part of an ensemble cast. He's the point of view character. But no, I think season 4, absolutely love him.
Amazing. So, Matt, what do you think about Ezra as a character throughout, and then also his plan with the Purrgil? What do you think about all that?
I think he's tying, because we follow Ezra and we're kind of the shoe-in to come into the Rebel Alliance, and with actually the Ghost Crew, to be fair, and then with the Rebels. I've enjoyed the journey we've had with him. I do hope we maybe get a bit more of him. I would love them to, after they finish Ahsoka, to do another Rebels, but do it live action. I feel that they could use Ahsoka as a bit of a springboard to be able to do that. But it depends what they end up doing with Ahsoka, I guess. Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 kids, a 19, an 18, and a 4-year-old, and we've been through them teenage years. And yes, Ezra, many times I could see my kids thinking, "You little bastards." I'm going to tell you not to do this, and I know exactly you're going to go off and do it yourself. But there is that maturity then when we get to the final bit. I think if Ezra had told them all his plan, that they would have tried to stop him doing certain things. And it's easier that if he just has it planned out and tells people what to do, then it'll work. Whereas if he starts saying, "This is what we're going to do all together," then people are going to start putting things in, and it's going to end up changing the plan to what having the Purgle come in and that and take him away, there was always that risk he was going to still be, because he gave himself up. He knew, and I think he did that to make sure he was with Thrawn, to make sure that he would take him away from everything, because that's the only way, really. Now, where we know that the Purgle can travel at light speed, but maybe this might, again, we're going to come back to the World Between Worlds. Can they travel time as well? Is he going to go so far into the future? Is that his plan? We know, I believe we know from the one of the early episodes when we first see the Purgle, when he touches them, there's that connection with them. So maybe that's the point when things start to get into place where he thinks, I can use these guys and we can win the war. So I think this seeing Ezra grow up and that it's just been good, and each season you've seen another side of him where he's grown into this this fantastic young man, and where we go from there with him, hopefully we get a bit more.
Indeed.
Can I just chip in as well? So the fact that he feels like a teenager and then he's exposed to all this new world. There is no Aladdin pun there, but this new world. And then, he goes on a journey and then he's like exposed to both sides of the Force and he kind of dabbles. Like we'd all be, there are some tantalizing things about the dark side of the Force. I think we'd be silly to say, oh no, we'd be like the space pope. We'd be totally great. No, fuck it. I'd be well into that shit. I'd be like, playing craps in Vegas, and I'd be like, use the Force, to just turn the dice the way I want them to go. So I think the fact that he goes through that is a tantamount to the writing. Now, obviously, we've got the writer's strike at the minute, and fully behind them. The system now is completely unfair, and I just want to call out that this is all down to the writing. Clearly, the voice acting is great, the animation is great as well, but that arc that Ezra has, for me, most of it is the writing that does the kind of heavy lifting.
And the best parts of Andor as well. I think Andor and Rebels are two of the best pieces of Star Wars content that exists, and I believe that is because the writing is among the best. And don't get me wrong, I love the prequels, but I think they're probably the worst written of the pieces of Star Wars content in general. Some of the dialogue choices, some of the things that happen, like the lore of the prequels is amazing, and some of the action scenes and some of the emotional beats, but it's just certain parts feel a bit of a first draft of a script and not enough editing of that. But this feels so specific. It feels very deliberate. And that's one of the reasons I'm quite excited about Filoni's, Ahsoka. He wrote all of it. And he didn't write Rebels by himself. He wrote it with other individuals, but it was he was the showrunner in a way. He kind of directed certain bits and wrote it. It was his vision in a lot of ways mixed with other individuals' input. And yeah, I agree with you completely there, Dave. It's absolutely fantastic. So I want to roll right back before we forget about it, and then there'll be a couple other little beats to get to, but we've covered the majority of the big beats. But the start of it, and I want to start with math on this bit first, it's the Mandalorian centric premiere. And as I said earlier on, I actually started writing quite a lot of notes about this because I wrongly remembered Bo-Katan being in this more. I wrongly believe the bit where she holds up the Darksaber was only a few episodes before the end of Rebels. I thought it was like just before Jedi Night sort of region, before Canon went. I thought it was really late on, but it's not. It's literally the first thing. and then it ends, and you're like, that. When I was saying, I think when we were talking about Star Wars in general, math and Mandalorian questions come up and things, and I've been asked about Bo-Katan and a Darksaber. Those are the two big gaps again. So a lot of people, watch Rebels. We saw Bo-Katan with a Darksaber, and then we see nothing, and then Mandalorian starts. And then all the Mandalorians are in hiding. And we're like, but what was the last thing we saw? And then in Book of Boba Fett, we get that few flashbacks of the basically Terminator 2 Judgment Day of Mandalore with the bombs going off and the security droids like walking down. And then we get a bit more of it in Mando Series 3 where they go back to Mandalore. But all this comes from Bo-Katan fighting a war and stuff that we didn't know about, we hadn't seen. So what did you think about this Mandalorian stuff and getting a bit more about Sabine as a character in Series 4?
I think we finally they flushed out Sabine. They
Yeah.
finally started to kind. When I started season 4 and I looked and I thought episode 1 and 2, 2 parts, episode 3 and 4, 2 parts. I thought, oh, this is interesting. So it was like, right, this is part of the story. We need to tell this. We need to explain it. And they did an awful lot. We learned about a mum. We learned about Sabine and creating the bomb. And then them trying to use it themselves. We saw the devastation of it.
How messed up is that as well? This is, as you mentioned earlier, this is a 6+ on Disney Plus. This is a kids show, and you're literally watching people get like dusted by their armor getting so hot it burns them alive and screaming, and all that's left is like piles of Mandalorian armor smoking.
That's the scary thing. Yeah. And the scary thing is, Sabine made that knowing. Why would she make something like that against her own people? It didn't make sense. But I can't remember how a mum and a brother didn't perish. I can't remember. They managed to. Did they get underneath something so it didn't hit them?
I think they got out of range. There's a moment where it says that it's a prototype, so the range of it isn't ideal.
Right.
And I will say,
yes.
There's one line where Sabine, the reason she made it is because she was arrogant and she wanted to prove she could, And even if you think about Sabine in Series 1, she was quite arrogant and quite bashful. And even over the Rebels, she's become a lot more mature as well. And I think she just kind of, made it to prove she could make something like that.
Because they get Sabine later on and they want her to adjust it so that it will go further range. So, yeah, the bit there where Sabine's like, hang on a minute, we can use this. We can turn this around. And so clever, the fact that she did, and then it goes from Mandalorian armor to Stormtrooper polystyrene armor that they've got.
Cardboard.
I do feel sorry for the Stormtroopers. They do really get a bad rap.
They're infinite, though, aren't they? That's the great thing about them. Yeah.
It always makes me laugh, the fact that the Empire takes over so much with such shitty aiming. Soldiers they can't shoot. In this we do see them shoot down planes. With the TIE fighters and things like that. But even then, they're not very good at it. They miss more than they hit.
They're better at propaganda than they are actually shooting things.
I suppose it is that thing. It's a force. There's so many of them. The fact that it's numbers more than actual power, I guess, to a certain degree. Yeah.
But also even Rex says, they try and kind of somewhat explain it in a bit of a hand-wavy way. They say it in certain dialogue things that Rex says, and they get it in comics and books a little bit. Whenever someone puts on a Stormtrooper helmet, after the original trilogy was made and the criticism came out, everyone who puts on a Stormtrooper helmet makes some sort of comment. I can't see very well on this thing, all the time. And I think that's meant to kind of be the thing, even though it's like, okay, well, you have got all these swaths of people. Surely someone can shoot someone a fatal wound. It's always just a little clip of the arm shot, isn't it? And they're just shooting around everyone. Obviously, it's the plot armor, but they are infinite. I think even in the finale, there were so many they got through, and you're like, has anyone even been remotely hit yet? It's like the Ugnaught got shot, and that was about it. And Gregor, obviously, but yeah, Mandalorian.
I guess that was Heroes of Mandalore 2, wasn't it? The second one, and the thing is, I think I text you, Mike, that I found out one of my favourite writers, Christopher Yost, wrote several episodes of Rebels, and this was one of them. And again, he's done some of my favourite runs in comics, including X-Force, which are just brilliant. I recommend everyone. So Kylan Yost, if you look at those X-Force. The thing is, do you not feel like it was just a bit like one of those tropes where it was like, hold on, I'll reroute the encryption. Right, there we go, we're in. Right, I'll just turn this machine against that type of material, and I'll just type in ChatGPT, how do I locate and target Stormtrooper armor? Oh, there we go. That's the exact molecule compound. There we go. Just target that. It was just, that was too convenient. And I was like, the convenience was bad enough, but when I found out it was by one of my favorite writers, it was like, oh, fucking hell.
It could have just been like a dial. She just turned it from, Mandalorian armor to Stormtrooper armor. It just,
Well, yeah, exactly. There's a dial, literally those two settings.
Yeah.
So I guess, ultimately, we've mentioned it a few times now. It is a kids' show. But the problem is, there's almost opposite ends of the scale. In that one episode, you're talking about brutally frazzling, people to death, and then this ridiculous plot device just to get out of the situation in quick, sharp time. So it's lumpy in that respect, where it's very kiddish 1 minute and then, super dark the next. But I mean, it sounds like criticism. I mean, that's a proper nitpick. It still doesn't take away from they were amazing episodes and really enjoyed them. But that was just, again, it just stretched the band of believability just a little bit too much for me.
I think that's the only issue I have with the Star Wars animation. And I feel it a lot with Star Wars Resistance. That is not a watch along I'm going to be doing at all, to clarify. Clone Wars, yep. Rebels, definitely. Tales of the Jedi, yes, but not Resistance. I was not overly a fan of that. And I think the issue is that although I love the animation, there's a lot of adult themes, they are restricted, and they do kind of, there's episodes obviously in Rebels that kind of get close to it, and in Clone Wars, when Maul is unleashed, and some of the Maul storylines, it is brutal. It is some of the most brutal Star Wars you can see, and it's just like, what is this? It's like 6+ Disney. Oh, Jesus. But I think with the live action Star Wars, one of the things that Andor does very well is show maturity, and I'm hoping that the Ahsoka show is kind of being like, okay, everyone who watched Rebels when they were young have grown up now, so let's show them these things. And Rebels does that steadily, and Clone Wars definitely does it. You watch Series 1 of the Clone Wars to Series 7, you're like, almost, how is this the same show? And I think there's a lot of shows that grow, I think Buffy the Vampire Slayer to a degree also does it. There's a lot of shows that when they're longer running, people grow with their audience.
Yeah.
So I think it works in that way, but I do feel there are restrictions, and it's kind of like, let's go really, really dark. And it's like, we have to just kind of wind it back a little bit. This was showing on Disney XD when it was premiering, so we do kind of have to ease up on all the genocide and the war and the death and stuff. But yeah, is there anything? So we've covered the Mandalorian stuff. Bo-Katan, I mean, what do you think of her popping up, Math? I mean, it was only brief. I remember her being in it for ages, but did you expect her to pop up?
Yeah, I mean, because the Darksaber were there, I thought she's going to be somewhere along this. Because I do have a question about that. I think I did ask you, but I can't remember what you said before. Sabine just gives her the Darksaber. Now all the clans, all the houses are there, and they seem to accept it and understand that she's been leading them anyway. This Darksaber just kind of, gives her a bit more, what's the word?
Status,
yeah, I suppose that's what, but in Mandalorian, they say that she had to win it. She couldn't, because when is it Din? No.
Din Djarin.
Din Djarin. When he goes to give her it, she's like, no, I can't take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason for that, it's not exactly explained. It's kind of, you have to read almost between the lines with it, but it is a little bit of hand wavy. It's essentially because the Darksaber was found, it was lost for ages, because you find out, Clone Wars, Maul had it, and then how he got it. And you see that the Darksaber should only be one, but it was from a foe that's kind of gone. It's kind of like finding it somewhere, and it's almost like, I found it here, I'm retrieving it, I'm bringing it back to my people, who's going to take it? And then Bo-Katan kind of formally kind of took it and was like, well, this is mine now. And then, as in Mando Series 3, it's shown that, she surrendered to Moff Gideon. And then from doing that, from you formally getting it and surrendering it, you can't just be given it back. You have to really win it, especially because you lost it. I think if someone else found it, there might be a bit of wiggle room, but I think it's because the last time she touched the Darksaber, she lost it. She doesn't deserve it back unless she proves herself. So I think that's more or less how it is, but it is not explained a lot. And I've seen, all this stuff quite a bit. But shall we move on? One or two more things before we sort of wrap up. There is Thrawn. So he's the big bad. And it's amazing because we spoke almost more about him in the last series than in this one because there's just so much in this series going on. But Thrawn, he's got his TIE Defender project, and a little Easter egg thing that anyone on my Patreon will probably know about is when the TIE Defender fuel depot gets blown up and when Kanan dies, that's because Thrawn gets called away by Tarkin for a certain thing for a little while. And that's explained in the book Thrawn Treason, the third in the Thrawn trilogy of canon novels. It's amazing. It's a really good book. It explains what he went off and doing. It's got heavy links to the Death Star and stuff. It's very, very cool. And when obviously that happens, shit hit the fan, basically. So what do we think of Thrawn? I'll go to you, Dave, first. Like, rewatching this and now knowing he's coming out in live action, like, how have you felt about Thrawn as a character and how's he built from when we saw him in Series 3?
I mean, apart from, you've basically got the Emperor and Vader, as your top two. Probably Vader is the most iconic, isn't he? But, he was basically the Emperor's lapdog or his henchman. But I think after that, you've got to say it's Thrawn, haven't you? I mean...
Tarkin and Thrawn, I'd say.
Yeah, but I mean, what did he... Well, he didn't do much in the movies. I know it's explored in the comics a bit more, and he pops up in Clone Wars and stuff, doesn't he? But sorry, spoilers. But I feel like he was a really good strategist, and you could see how he went up through the ranks. But I still feel like if you're in a conversation with Thrawn, he is setting traps for you.
100%.
And again, I just feel like he's Christopher Waltz in Inglourious Bastards. I just feel he's outgunned you already verbally, and you are screwed. And his obsession with art and using art to understand his foes and stuff as well gives him an interesting kind of slant. And you almost think, I don't know if it was the easy way out for Ezra, but it was certainly a good writing way to kind of give a bit of mysticism as like, yeah, we can't kill this guy off. I mean, he was created by Timothy Zahn, I think, wasn't he? And he was part of Legends and an absolute legendary character, no pun intended. But, you can see why they're thinking, you know what, this is a great character. Like, just everything about him is great. So we've got to kind of pull him in and explore him as much as possible. So, yeah, I think he could be great. I guess it'll be interesting where Disney go, because they're not doing very well as a company at the minute. And so, there's rumors that, they're scaling back or stretching out a bit of the content. And, with Star Wars and with Marvel and rumors, they've way overpaid for Fox, so you might see a little bit of scaling back in the next few years. But you kind of feel like he deserved a movie. That's where his debut should have been, and for me, I have no idea. This is pure speculation, and you might know better, but obviously we know quite a lot that's in Mando. And, the other thing I'd say is when I watched this season, it hit me that, you know what, without this season of Rebels, you probably don't have The Mandalorian. Because they did so much world building and so much kind of culture creation, if you like. It created this world or this little pocket of the Star Wars universe where you're like, oh, I want to know more about that. So I feel like that was a direct line. But yeah, I just feel like Thrawn, obviously he's going to make his debut. He's going to be a bit of a bastard. But we don't know a lot between Mandalorian and the sequels. So there's 30 years in between, Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. And obviously you've got the New Order, has to be born out of the ashes of the Empire. And I've got to think Thrawn is very central to making that happen. But, do you know? Is he or...
We've got nothing about Thrawn. Him appearing in the Ahsoka trailer is the only thing we know about him after Rebels. And regarding the First Order, there's a book series called the Aftermath Trilogy, which I have here behind me. So amazing book series. That's set just after, 18 months after Return of the Jedi, and that's where the Empire, a lot of them just disappear into the unknown regions, the Imperial Remnant. And then we get a bit of it in Mando with Moff Gideon, and there's like the Dark Council where he speaks to Pelion, and Brendel Hux, who is Armitage Hux's dad, who is Domhnall Gleeson's gingerhead character in the sequel trilogy. So we get a little bit of that, but aside from that, and then there's like bits and pieces in certain literature where it's got like 1 or 2 chapters. In Shadow of the Sith, actually, there by Adam Christopher. Sorry, my chair keeps falling down. It looks like I'm doing a comedy act. I'm not intentionally. It's not a joke, and it's not a point I'm making. My chair is failing miserably. But there's little bits and pieces, but it's like a chapter here and there. They're just kind of quietly doing stuff. So I believe what you're saying is correct. I think what we know is Filoni's making a movie, a live-action movie, and we think that all the live-action series, seemingly like the Demon the Mandoverse, are kind of feeding into that, all the post-Return of the Jedi stuff. And so I imagine, and this is my own estimations and stuff, is that it's going to be called Heir to the Empire. It's going to be like a canon retelling of the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Thrawn's going to be the big bad in it. And then I think probably that's when maybe Ahsoka will die, or Ezra, or someone like major's going to die, maybe taking Thrawn with them, because unfortunately we don't know Ahsoka is dead in the sequel trilogy, but her voice is heard at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, and every other Jedi you hear is dead. So it's kind of hinted, but there are possibilities she could have communed and she's across the galaxy and that sort of stuff. But there is a lot of, what has she been doing at this time? You know, there's going to be some weight to it. So I'm very excited about that. But I think the Ahsoka is going to be like a soft prequel into that film we're eventually going to get. So I was going to say with Thrawn then, Math, opinions and stuff on Thrawn, as we'll start to wrap up. But what are your opinions on Thrawn in this one?
It's great. Again, I think I said last time, he's that chess player that's several steps ahead of you. It's like we're going a prize. There's a line in it where I think it's after she's been captured, which is a really good. I quite enjoyed that episode because is it Ryder betrays him, but then it doesn't betray him, and so I watched it thinking, you bastard, bloody knew it. But then it flipped around because it was to get them where they needed to be. But Thrawn says later on, he says, she'd been captured. Well, she lasted longer than I thought. And that, so it's that point when you realise that these are just, everyone's just a pawn to you. Everyone's just put into this place. And, you know, in the previous season when I can't remember the general who didn't listen to what was being told, and he
Constantine, I think.
Constantine, yeah. Well, if he just stuck and listened and done as he's told, we would never have season 4.
Yeah.
Whereas they didn't, so then it scuppers Thorne's plan. You know, 9 times out of 10, the Bendu, obviously that's not something you expected, so that kind of, but everything else was just going to plan.
As you say, the only things that beat him are unpredictable Force-related things. If you watch every battle he's had, they're the only times in Rebels he ever seems to lose, because you just can't predict that stuff.
There's no way. I mean, you know, there's no way he would have thought, hang on a minute, the Purgles are going to turn up and take me away. You know, there's no way he would have thought that the Bendu's going to turn up and destroy. I mean,
I didn't see it coming.
The thing I would say with the Bendu one and the previous one, why did he go down? If he hadn't gone down to kind of lead the land in party, if he'd have stayed up there, if it all gone tits up, he could have just opened fire on the planet again. And I think it's his problem is possibly his ego.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is where maybe that might be something they'll do in future. The thing that's going to really beat him is his own ego, is himself, because, and it's the same actor, isn't it? The voice actors,
Lars Mikkelsen. Basically, the only person who did the voice work is also going over to live action.
Which is a shame. because I do feel that. I mean, maybe the age wise, maybe that's what it is, because they won't all fit for the live action. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, at least it's going to be Thrawn's voice. I suppose you can probably get round Ezra's a little bit because he's going to be a bit older and this, that, and the other. But Thrawn, you kind of...
It's about a decade difference. So yeah, a lot of the characters are going to age. It is,
but you could do... I mean, Freddie Prince Jr., he could turn up as Kanan Jarrus, couldn't he?
He would work, I think. But I think, obviously, some of the other characters... I mean, I don't know about the voice actors in Star Wars. I think they're all fantastic, but there's certain aesthetic things where they need to a degree, look like the character, but then also... No shade against voice actors, but not all good voice actors are good on-screen actors. Just like there's a lot of on-screen actors who aren't very good at voice work. They're interlinked skills, but not everyone has both. So I do wonder if that is an element of it mixed with how they look, if they wanted to be involved, their interest in it, what was required of them. Because a lot of Star Wars stuff, almost everyone who does it says you have to train for months. There's a lot of running scenes, especially if you're like Ahsoka. You have to do so much training physically with blades and things like that, so they get as much as they can. But I agree. I mean, I'm very excited to see Lars Mikkelsen reprise the role. And obviously Thrawn is TIE Defender project. Like that. It's funny, when you see Thrawn, everything about him, he predicts everything. And he knows what's going to happen, And it's like the TIE Defender, if they'd let him continue with the TIE Defender project instead of the Death Star, the war would have been lost, because the TIE Defender completely blew the Death Star out of the water. But it was Palpatine's arrogance. And I just wanted to note that I realised I didn't fully address the point that when Dave, you said, in the tiers of Vader and or Palpatine Vader and things, I think Tarkin had more political power, but I think Thrawn, and he's a very, very powerful adversary, 8 out of 10, but I think Thrawn is a 10 out of 10. He's just... You cannot beat him in military strategy. And some of the books have got some incredible battles the writing of it and things, and his character is just, he's so above anyone. And it's why he's going to become such an incredible villain. And in Legends, he was very, very similar, more brutal in Legends as what we've seen. But in canon, I'm absolutely loving it. And Rook as well, his no-gree power played by Warwick Davis. But is there anything else as we start to wrap up? Is there any final points? There's a few bits and pieces, like Mon Mothma shows up. There's a bit of stuff with the rebellion, some, Bail Organa. There's a few bits and pieces here. But is there anything major we want to tackle before we wrap up, if we haven't tackled it yet?
I'll just say, you did mention him right at the top with callbacks to like Rogue One and stuff, but Saul Gerrera showing up. And again, in one of his incarnations, we see him popping up here, there and everywhere. The fact that it is Forrest Whitaker, unmistakable voice, just unbelievable. And you see those political ideals. And that's why I say, sometimes you got Sabine like, just reroute the encryption and turn this on the stormtroopers. It's so polar opposite to some of these real deep political things that the show is saying about, different ideologies and the on the surface level. This group and that group want the same thing, but ultimately they're the Judean People's Front. And so they completely don't agree. They can fuck off. And so, I thought that was really, really great. And not just because he showed up, but he played a great role as well. And, utterly ruthless. And, Ezra, he always wants to see the best in people, doesn't he? And so he wants to see the best in him. But, he sort of learns that, we want the same things, but we don't want to achieve them in the same way.
Agreed. And it's one of those, I did forget to mention, I've got a note of it, as you say, it's when Saw Gerrera speaks to Mon Mothma at the Yavin 4 base. That, again, the script, it's so good. That dialogue from Saw Gerrera to Mon Mothma matches some of the top tier dialogue in Andor. And we're going to get some of that, I hope, because we think the Forrest Whitakers are going to reprise his role in Andor. My prediction is one of the arcs is going to be very central to Saw Gerrera, because we've got bits and pieces in Rebels showing how, by the point of Rogue One, Mon Mothma and Saw, she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's like, he's an extremist. He's too much. He's just like beyond a last resort. He's almost as bad as the Empire. And when you get his readiness just to kill, obviously in the previous season it was click clack, and then in this, I think it's more like how you beat your enemies, how many civilians you're willing to take, collateral damage, the greater good, all these things. And as you say, Dave, This is for kids, and this is talking about the tactics of war and really the grey of good, air quotes, and evil. And again, I think this really laid the groundwork for a show like Andor. Obviously, Rogue One was the main catalyst for that, but where we get this, where Rogue One came out and then Rebels expanded on those characters in series 3 and 4 of Rebels, and they work in tandem with the character. We get a little bit more of that content, and Fallen Order did it a bit as well. We're getting bits and pieces of Saw Gerrera, and I think it really gives birth to that political climate we see in Andor. So, Matt, anything you want to say about Saw Gerrera before we wrap up?
Again, I've enjoyed him. He's not someone that I think you could do a series on, but I think he's someone who you could do definitely several episodes, but or even a slight story arc from, in Andor to kind of flesh him out a little bit more. Not that there's much flesh left. But yes, I think he's that kind of he's kind of that agency that, when things aren't going well, you need that dirty tactics. He's the kind of person that you call. And then you deny all knowledge.
Guerrilla tactics, Saw Gerrera.
Yeah. I do have another question.
Go ahead.
And that in the final episode, there's a bit with, I think they're Emperor guards. There's 3 of them that come and take Ezra. They pick him up with these yellow beaming spears. Is that anything? Because it seemed to counteract his kind of force powers and just kind of suspend him in the air. I'm thinking, what is that something that they've always had? Because it's the only time I've ever seen them.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea, but I haven't really seen it much either. I think it links in with the Purge Troopers that we see in Jedi Fallen Order a little bit. They are the Emperor's Royal Guard, but I think it's kind of anti-Jedi weapons. And I suspect, this is me predicting, I think that by the time of the Rebels and the war, almost all the Jedi have been purged. There's barely any left, I hear one thing, I know people, we've discussed about it on the show, where you go, oh yeah, all the Jedi are gone. Oh, and this one shows up, and this one shows up, and this one shows up. It's like, but I saw a meme either today or yesterday, and funnily enough it said, okay, so 10,000 Jedi Knights, yes. Well, how many are left if you kill 99% of them? There's still actually 100. And when you think of it like that, you go, that does kind of ruin it a bit. Of like, I want there not to be too many Jedi, but if you do actually kind of think about it, if there are 100 survived, and you read the Vader comics 2017, he kills like 5, I think, in that comic run alone, if not more. The Inquisitors kill several. In Jedi Fallen Order, you kind of see elements of where other ones went and bits and pieces like that. So I think that, although I don't go off a slight tangent, but I think with the Jedi stuff, I think it's like that. But the weapon itself, I'm honestly not actually too sure, because I don't think I've actually seen it before.
You're saying about the Jedi, with Canon, the Fallen Order and the Jedi Survivor games, he's walked away from that at the start in Fallen Order. He's just a worker. He only ever actually uses some powers because his mate's about to die. Yeah. And that. So there's probably lots of Jedi. To a certain degree, with Kanan in this, although he still used the Force, it was still a struggle for him to do certain things until it became muscle memory and it came back to him.
But like Luke in Last Jedi, close him off to the Force.
Yeah. So maybe it is a case there's so many of them that have gone away. Maybe there is still 100 of them around, but they're so far away from the Force, and it's handy for them to always just, we've got enough Jedi,
Even Thrawn says it, doesn't he? He says they're all scattered and in hiding and things, and there's just no one really. Even Obi-Wan, he's a powerful Jedi, as we saw in Twin Sons, but he's got a very specific plan he's trying to do. And when you see what the other Jedi are up to in other content like Jedi Survivor, most of them are trying to hide and either survive, fall into the dark side, or close themselves off and just hide away, or try to subtly rebuild the Order in their own way. But we'll wrap up. We'll start to wrap up because it's getting a bit late. Is there anything else we haven't tackled about this show we want to say before we plug anything?
Before we plug anything, I'll just say, for me, this season, 10 out of 10.
Nice.
I can't, other than the nits that I will pick, but, you can't drag the score down for that. Just in terms of pure Star Wars greatness, everything you want the intrigue. It kind of for me, it almost brings the nostalgia of the original trilogy, but also the lore of what's gone on with the prequels as well, which I don't have as much of an affinity, but I can appreciate the story they were trying to tell. And it brings those two things together. And I just think out of all of the animated shows, I mean, this is absolutely at the pinnacle for me.
I agree. This Series 4 of Rebels is better than any season of the Clone Wars, I'd say. There are moments in the Clone Wars that I think surpass most moments in Rebels, but it's a lot less of a consistent thing. Series 4 of Rebels is like, this is the reason I say to people you need to watch Rebels. There's moments like in Season 2 where you go, wow, that's a bit of amazing Star Wars, and you get other bits and pieces. But when you get to Season 4, it's just so good. You could each like little, the episodes with Saw Gerrera or the Mandalorian-centric episodes, you could almost just be like, before you watch Mandalorian, just watch these two. I wouldn't want anyone to. I want you to watch it all. But you can almost do that because they're so well done. So, Math, sort of final thoughts on Rebel Series 4, Rebels as a whole. Obviously, we're planning on doing another episode where we'll link it to Ahsoka and stuff. So we'll get into the future and predictions in that kind of episode, because otherwise we'll be here all night. But what have you thought about this journey? And are you happy that after all my pressuring and on the Andor, and me and Dave pushed you into it, within the last year, towards the tail end of 2022, we were going on about this animated show. Is it what you expected? And are you happy you saw it?
Now, this is the point where I said it's all been an act.
It was rubbish.
Don't watch it. It's horrible. What a waste of time. And that. No, I mean, if Mike says to you to go and watch it, you really should do. I mean, it's such good storytelling. And that I do look forward to, probably in a couple of years' time, when George is a bit older, to sitting down and watching it again with him. Mm-hmm. I look forward to watching it again. There's certain episodes. I mean, this, with having YouTube, it's great because there's little bits where I've watched Ahsoka and Darth Vader fight several times, and that there's some amazing moments throughout. And now the fact that I've seen it all, there's certain bits I can go back to. I don't think I'll go back to episode 10 of season 4.
I was so not looking for. Me and Megan had to really pluck up the strength. We got to it last week, and she was like, "I don't want to watch it." And I was like, "Megan, we have to. We were going to 2 weddings this weekend. She was like, "I don't want to watch it. I don't want to." It's like, I was like, "It's one of the best episodes." She's like, "But I don't want to cry." And at the end of it, streaming, she was several tears and no shame.
Well, I suppose it's like your 2 weddings and the Jedi funeral.
Very good and very sad.
But that shows how good it is, the fact that, you're watching something like this and it can really hit and pull the heartstrings. There's been several moments throughout the entire seasons where you've really felt something. It's not just, I mean, I listened to one of Dan's podcasts from a while ago when he would talk about the X-Men. I love the X-Men. I love watching the cartoons, but you don't get the same feeling as what you do here. And it just seems to just pluck at certain points, certain parts of your, pulling at your heartstrings, and it really makes you feel that you're with these guys.
Mm-hmm. And so we'll wrap up. Math, are you excited? Obviously, we've got Ahsoka coming out, and I think watching Rebels is far more important than watching Clone Wars. For Ahsoka, to clarify, Clone Wars is good. And it's got some very cool Ahsoka moments, but the majority of stuff we're going to see in Ahsoka, which we will talk about, is from Rebels. But has this made you, last question, has this made you excited now to go and watch Clone Wars? And we may start to embark that towards the end of the year, but it'll probably primarily be a project for 2024 of watching that, because we've got Ahsoka coming out, and then there's a lot of other shows like Loki and Echo, and I think there's other something else Star Wars coming out soon as well, but and the Marvel show as well. Lots of stuff coming out, so we'll probably try and start towards the end. But are you excited for Clone Wars then, after watching Rebels now?
I can't wait to go watch the Ewoks film, to be fair. I am.
I courage.
Yep. I am, because seeing Ahsoka, I mean, I reckon that once I've finished watching Ahsoka, it'll be end of October. That's maybe when I probably go into. I may try watch little bits Clone Wars.
You got to start with the movie first.
Yeah.
To warn. The quality of Rebels, it started at like a 6 or 7, and it's got up one notch at a time for the series, up to series 4, which is like 10 out of 10. When you go out to Clone Wars, it's like it's like, okay, the movie, 3 out of 10 maybe. Then series 1 has got a few episodes. So unfortunately, you start at a lower point when you start Clone Wars to climb back up.
Really selling this for me, yeah.
There are some incredible episodes in series 1. So,
yeah, I think wanting to see where these characters have come from, and again, I mean, hopefully I'll enjoy the Obi-Wan and Anakin as well. Kind of seeing that. Because
I will say, Clone Wars is amazing. To clarify, even though I'm jokingly, crapping on it a bit, it is genuinely amazing. There's just a lot.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that's a bit worrying, is the fact that there's 7 seasons and they're all about 22 episodes long.
Series 2, 3, 4, 5 are all 24 episodes, and the other ones are between 12 and 16. So.
Right. So it's a bit of a slog, but the thing is, they're only about 25 minutes long each. Yeah. So
no, exactly. So, there's a total of 133 episodes of Clone Wars.
I reckon if we were to cover them, we might even want to think about splitting up a season into 2. 24 episodes, that's quite an undertaking, isn't it? So, but I think the movie warrants its own episode.
That will be, maybe we do that before the end of the year. We'll try and get that. I'll try and force Megan to watch it so she can just slate it the whole time.
Yeah. Thinky the Hut. I remember it.
The issue is, if you're going to try to split up each season into like 2 episodes, is there a certain point where you can, this is where we need to cut off,
Yeah. Clone Wars is structured in a very different way.
Right.
It's not even all in chronological order. There's some episodes in series which are before the whole series. There's lots of jumping around, and most of it is in arcs. So it's like most of the time you get a one-off episode here and there, but generally it's 3 or 4 episodes make up one battle on one planet. It's literally Clone Wars. Most of it is battles. There's a few arcs, but generally it's like you could almost do an episode in every 4 episodes, in a sense. But last thing, Dave, anything to say about Clone Wars, and then plug away, good sir.
No, you've got me thinking about Clone Wars. The more I think about it, we'll discuss this off air, but maybe it requires a bit of deeper thinking rather than just one season, one episode.
Yeah,
I just feel like some of the episodes in particular. So you and I have spoken a few times. You really like the last 3 seasons, but for me in season 4 there are some really deep thinking episodes in there.
I agree.
About like power structures and human behavior and all that kind of thing. So I think it'd be great to go back and watch that and just chew the fat with you guys on it. But no, it's been great. Again, Rebels, it's an easier sell, isn't it? It's 4 seasons. Despite there's quite a lot of episodes in a season. Obviously, this last one, we've just got the 15. But, when I was going through it, I'm like, Christ, there's so much that happens.
Yeah.
And honestly, in the last season, Matt, you posted in our group and you were like, in season 3, this was, and you're like, oh no, I've just seen something really bad. And in my head, I'm like, oh, he's just seen Kanan and Gerrera die. But obviously it wasn't that. And so I kept my mouth shut, and I'm glad I did. But just in my memory, it all kind of blended into this one thing. And so it's been interesting to go back and do it season by season rather than just binge whenever you get a chance. And I will just say, so the previous couple of seasons, I have been disorganized and just had to binge them. Whereas this season, I binged them because I just couldn't fucking stop watching them. I watched it in 2 sittings, and I was just like, I just can't stop watching this. Just so good. And so, yeah, probably, I would say, what I want to say is I'll watch them again before long, but so much damn content, isn't there? There's so much new stuff. But yeah.
Lots of reality show for you to watch as well.
Oh God, tell me about it. But I'll probably cherry pick a little bit, like you've said, Mike, with the end of season 2, and like just to punish myself, watch Jedi Night again, and it's so good. If you've got this far and you haven't watched Rebels, what are you doing with your life? Go and watch it.
100%. So, Dave, what have you got going on? I'll put the usual stuff in the description, but tell people where they can find you.
Well, the most regular place, well, apart from Chris and Dave's reality TV cast, so tonight is actually the final of Love Island, which I am missing to record here, so that is not any great shakes. I'll watch it tomorrow. But yeah, so we're going to finish, and then I don't know what we're doing after that, but I'm just looking forward to some time off from that one. VHS Strikes Back, so our weekly podcast, and we'll cover all things from the video era, so kind of mostly 80s and 90s, but we'll stretch a bit to the 70s and a little bit to the early 2000s as well. So when does this episode come out?
It will be it's not going to be this weekend, it'll be the next one, so it'll be early August-ish, second week in August, I think.
Then in that case, I'm sure we'll have something great coming out.
Sorry about that.
But the calendar doesn't quite stretch to that moment. But if you go to the back catalogue and you were listening to this moment, then we're about to release Species from 1996 with Natasha Henstridge, which is very good. And there are a couple of things that spring to mind there. And then next week we've got Office Space by the legendary Mike Judge.
Very, very excited by all that. Math, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter. It's MatthewK78. I created a Threads, but I just didn't really get it, so I've not really gone back to that. And then I am actually popping up on a couple of things. I'm going to be on with Jax on the Back to the Filmography, doing a film called
one
13.
of my favourite podcasts. I love it.
When we're talking, I'm down to do Hummingbird or Redemption, depends which you want to call it. But there was one of the films that hadn't been picked called 13. And he told me, he says it's probably one of the worst reviews of what Jason Statham's done.
Wow.
So I've watched that. So
glutton for punishment.
Now I dispute that because I'm pretty sure I saw one of the worst he's ever done.
Did you do
what was it? Set it off or something, or turn it up? I can't remember.
Oh, the dance one. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a dance one. It was a weird kind of. He was a gangster.
No, the gangster ones, yeah. But there's the. Who did the Return of the King?
In the Name of the King was
King.
Spider Dan and Angry Andy, and I'd watched half of that because I'd been eyeing it up to make Chris watch it because Burt Reynolds is in it.
Well, Chris
and I got halfway through it and I couldn't fucking finish it. And I hardly never finish a movie. I'm like, I've started it, so I'll finish. And it was fucking horrendous.
Well, you should go watch 13.
Right.
But I could be playing on that. It could have turned out to be a really good film. You just have to wait and see. I'm going to be on with Spider Dan in. I think it's probably going to be September. We're doing we're picking the worst 5 medical professions.
Nice.
So, I haven't picked him. Hopefully, Dan hasn't picked him. I don't think he has, but like Hannibal Lecter kind of things. So I've got a few from a few different other medias. I've tried to go a bit obscure as well because I know Dan will. And that, so
you definitely will.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, he'll come out with something like Nurse Pepper Potts or something like that. From a certain Marvel comic that no one ever knew of. I don't know, but
Pam Grier character from the 70s exploitation.
Yeah, and that, I'm a little bit worried, but
I'm very, very excited about that.
It's funny because I've tried to go a little bit obscure. And there's one that he won't have. I know for a fact there's.
Don't spoil it.
I'm not saying anybody, but there's one that he won't have. But I kind of thought I would need to go a little bit obscure, but I guarantee it'll be nothing compared to what it comes out with.
I'm very excited about that. I'll put details in the description, and I'll say, Dave, your episode was on Turn It Up, and it was the 3rd episode of Back to the Filmography.
That was it. Turn it up. Turn it up, set it off, step it up. It was something like that I could remember, but it was a highly unmemorable movie.
So much so you couldn't even remember the title of it. But friends, you can find me at Genuine Chit-Chat on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on TikTok now as well. And you can watch. You can be on my YouTube channel and you can see all my episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat. Star Wars authors I've interviewed on there and are currently talking to another one. So keep your eyes out for that. Got some really cool episodes coming up, some Star Wars related, some not. Just subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can. Trying to push my subscribers up again. I'm one of the very few channels where most channels, you see their subscribers and most of their videos get less than that. But most of my videos are getting more views than my subscribers. And I'm like, come on guys, come subscribe. Join me for the Star Wars and the non-Star Wars content.
You know what you need to do? You need to do the bro thing. So I'm going to talk to you about this, but before you do that, smash that subscribe button, hit us a like, and maybe there's a bit of promotion stuff going on. There.
I do need to get on
subliminal messages.
It's either that or you need to wear something very low cut and get in a paddling pool or something like that. So I
think people pay me not to do that, let alone trying to get them to subscribe to see that kind of
thing. There's a whole Patreon tier for that.
Yeah, Genuine Chit-Chat After Dark. But yeah, you can subscribe to my Patreon as well. You can donate to my coffee, and either of those things will get you some bonus content, including some Star Wars Legends book reviews, my Thrawn book reviews that link into Ahsoka. Lots of great content out there. And also, if anyone wants to review Comics in Motion or Genuine Chit-Chat on any of the podcast apps, even if you just rate it on Spotify, send us a screenshot of it and I'll send you a free episode of Afterthoughts of your choice. If you're listening to this, it'll probably be a Star Wars one if you fancy it, so you can do that as well. But we will be back to talk about Rebels as a whole. We're aiming to take some listener questions, depending on how many listeners give us some. But please send it into social media. You can either contact myself on social media, or you can contact at Comics in Motion P, or you can comment on this YouTube video if you're watching there, and then we'll include it in the next conversation, and we'll talk about Rebels, how it links in with Ahsoka, and I'll give you a little bit more information on some of the Ahsoka content, including like the novel and some other stuff, without being spoilery, but just if anyone wants to try and catch some last minute content. But that episode is probably going to be recorded and released like very soon before Ahsoka, and then we'll be doing the weekly discussion shows. Wherever you're listening to this or watching this, it's going to be on that feed. You're going to be able to hear, I'm going to have Math on and Dave on at least once, and a wide variety of other guests. I've got a few people already lined up to talk about the Ahsoka series, also known as Rebels Series 5. But thank you, Dave, for helping me convince Math to watch all of Rebels in our Andor discussion, and thank you for trusting me in watching Rebels those years ago when we first met. And Math, thank you for taking the plunge, not only into being on like our co-host, a familiar, regular on our Star Wars podcast, and being our little guinea pig. We were like, we already seen it, quick, push Math through the deaths of these characters you like, go through Jedi Night for us, and we'll watch from afar, cackling, waiting for you to get there, and then we get to do it all again with the Clone Wars, but we will not be doing that till after the Ahsoka stuff. So you're going to get some lots of Star Wars content from us for at least the next year and a half, I think you've got. And then Andor Series 2 will probably come out. So you've probably got about 2 years of Star Wars content from us. But if that's not enough, check out Star Wars Comics in Canon. You never have to have read a Star Wars comic to enjoy. But friends, thank you so much for listening. Dave and Math, thank you once again for joining me on this adventure. And as always, to both of you and to all our listeners, may the Force be with you.
And with you.